So pasta, we're making some homemade pasta today. So pasta is a staple food of traditional Italian cuisine, and what you normally use is you normally use 00 flour, which is like an ultra fine flour. However, some of you might not have that, so I'm just going to use plain flour today, okay? And the ratio is 100 grams of flour to 1 medium egg. Okay, so we're going to start by, you can do this on a chopping, you can do this in a mixing bowl if you want to, but you can actually, the traditional way is actually to do it on your work surface. So, 100 grams of flour. Now because I'm using plain flour, I might not be able to be making as much pasta as if I was using 00 flour. So if you have or are able to get 00 flour, then you could use that instead. Okay, so I've got a mound of 100 grams of flour, and I'm just going to make a hole in the middle because that's where I'm going to break the egg. So this could get a bit messy, but take it slowly. So break the egg into the hole. Okay, and all I'm now going to do is I'm now going to start to break the flour into the egg. Just gonna, okay. Now if you're able to get obviously free range eggs, then it'll be nice and orange dough that you want, that'd be the better quality. Alright, so I'm going to keep moving. You can see it started off by a bit of a leakage there, but it's fine. Obviously make sure your surface is nice and clean before using and placing your food on the top. Okay, so we're coming together now, and obviously depending on the size of your egg, depends on how much flour, so you can go from there really, okay? If you've got a small egg, then you might not need as much flour. Okay. Right, so that's coming together. You can see I've got quite a bit of flour still left there, but that's fine. So I'm now going to get my hands involved and bring it together as a dough. Okay. So when I've done this, you can then see how much pasta this actually makes. So if you're making it for a lot more people, you can then decide sort of how much pasta you want to create, so you might want to then double up. So the ratio is 100 grams of flour to 1 egg. Alright, so you can see now I've got quite a bit of flour left over, that's fine, because what I'm now going to do is I'm now just going to be kneading the dough. Okay. So as I knead, so remember we're going to knead with the palm of our hand here, okay, and we want to really dry. At the moment, the gluten isn't developed yet because can you see it tears quite easily, okay? I can always add some more flour if it gets too sticky. So, whilst I'm kneading this, I'll ask you about the science behind it, okay? So, when we added the egg to the flour, it obviously became wetter. So when we make flour wet, think about the two proteins that are being combined to make the gluten. Do you remember what they are? They both begin with G. So they're gliadine and glutenin. So the glutenin and gliadine, when they're combined with moisture, so the egg in this case, they produce gluten. Now it's gluten which is what makes a dough stretchy. Okay. Now I'm going to need to knead this for at least 5 minutes. Can you see at the moment it's still just tearing, all right? So I'm going to keep kneading it. Now we knead it K-N-E-A-D-E-D, so we knead, because what we're doing is we're actually adding energy into this, because the more energy we apply to this dough, the more the protein will be developed to make it stretchy, okay? And you'll know when it's stretchy, when it's ready, because it will then spring back. All right, so I'm going to keep going for a bit and then we'll come back. So I've been kneading it for about 5 minutes. and it still feels quite tough, but you'll notice that it's actually able to be stretched a bit further now, and it's really quite hard to stretch. It's wanting to pull back against me. Then you can know when it's done because when you prod it, it springs back. Now, in order to develop the gluten further, now what we're going to do, we're going to rest it. It's really important to rest it. So I'm just going to place it back into a bowl, cover with cling film, and just leave it to rest. Now, it might not look that much pasta, not much in there, but once it's rolled out, it will go quite a long way. So we're going to rest it because develop the gluten and to let the flour hydrate. Okay, so I'm going to leave that to rest. So now I've left my dough to rest for a bit. You can see how it's actually changed quite a lot now, and it's really quite more like a dough. Look at the stretchiness of this now. The gluten has really developed. Just going to put a bit more flour on my work surface. Okay, so what we're now going to do is now I'm going to roll it out. Okay, now have a think about all the different types. So I'm going to cut it in half first of all and just use a roller. If you haven't got any pasta rollers or attachments to machines, just use a standard rolling pin. If you haven't got a rolling pin at home, you can just use an empty bottle. All right, so it's going to keep wanting to spring back. All right, and that's good because it means that you've developed all of that lovely gluten. Now pasta, you want to be as thin as can be. You don't want it to be thick. They say that you should be able to sort of see through it. You should be able to sort of, not see through it, but you should be able to see the light through it. Keep it floured. You don't want it to stick to the surface. All right, so I'm going to keep rolling. You can see I can really use my hands to stretch it as well. Now, if you want to use it to make lasagna, you just need to cut it into rectangles that's going to fit your container. But I'm going to experiment with some different shapes. Now, think about the shapes that you get in packets. You get the sort of the macaroni, which is those sort of ones that are sort of hollow are going to be very difficult to make. But what you can make is we can make tagliatelle. We can make the bows, which are called farfalle, which are like the bows. They're quite easy to make. And I'm trying to think what else we can make. I'll show you some of them. I'll show you some of them, and then we'll see. I'm trying to find the name of them, and then we can then go from there. And then what you can then do is then you can just make your own types. All right. So here's one. All right, you can see I can still stretch it quite a lot now, which is amazing. Okay, so I'm going to start with just basic tagliatelle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it just gently, and then I'm going to slice down. Now think about how thick you want your tagliatelle to be. Make sure it's well floured so it doesn't stick together. There you go, there's a piece of tagliatelle. Obviously, depending on how long you roll it out for, depends on how long your piece is going to be. And obviously, if you're going to be cooking them at the same time, you want them to be the same thickness. All right, so there's some tagliatelle now. Just undo them. And what I've got here is I've just got a baking tray. Now I don't want them to sort of clump together because you want to let them to dry. It's really important that you allow pasta to dry if you're going to be using it in like a spaghetti bolognese, which is what I'm going to make later. If you're using it into a lasagna, obviously you can use it straight away and just put it in between. So there we go. I'm just going to lay them out here. Another thing you can do is if you're making tagliatelle or spaghetti, is you want to sort of hang them up to dry. So I've just got here the trays from my oven. And all I will then do is create, well, see, my work surface is quite slippery, but what you can do is once it's there, you can then just drape, I don't know if you can see that, you can then just drape the tagliatelle over it as if you're drying it, if you're drying clothes. Okay, so if you are doing that, you want to leave it to dry, you know, might only take a couple of hours, or you can leave it overnight. Okay, right, I'm going to continue doing this. Another thing you can do is I can just, instead of rolling it out, I can get like a ball of it, okay, and I can then just use a knife doesn't work as well because I haven't got a board. So you scrape it. I could do with like a chopping board. Where's my chopping board? There it is. And you use a knife and drag it towards you. And it creates like a conch shell. Can you see that? Alright, so I've just got a normal butter knife here. You only need a tiny piece of pasta and you hold it hold it at the side. Can you see? You hold it like a 45-degree angle and push down against the board and pull it towards you. I'll have to do it this way because, so I'm going to pull it towards me, drag it, and as you can see the top starts to roll over the top. Keep going. And then you've got a nice sort of curly bit. And these are great for sauces because the sauce can then get trapped in between. So there's a different type. I'm going to put them on my tray. Another one, if I go back to this again, what I can do on here is if I cut it into like little rectangles, not to make sure the edges are neat, and just pinch the bits together, you've got your bows. Like that. And you've got your bows. You do that again. So just in the middle, pinch it together. And there's your bows. Okay. It's just really having a play around. And if you want to make ravioli, you can just make a normal ragu and roll out like I showed you, and then just put a little dollop and then fold it over and then cut it out. I might make another video on I might make a video on how to do that. If not, just go to a YouTube clip and just see people making ravioli. So I'm going to continue making lots of different shapes with my pasta. And you can see so far I've only used probably a third of it, and I've made a little bit of tagliatelle, some bows, something like the conch shells. All right, so you get a variety. You're going to leave them to dry, and then when you cook them, they literally only take a couple of minutes because they're fresh pasta. The dried pasta you get in the packet tends to take a lot longer to cook. Sometimes that sort of pasta, they don't use egg, they use water instead. So if you do buy pasta, try and make sure it says sort of, egg pasta. You're going to want that because it contains more protein. So I'm going to play around with these and I'll show you what I produced at the end. Another thing you could use, just look at the around the kitchen. You can use your utensils. So I've got make like a little sausage. And then using this one, I'm going to do the same as before, but drag it along the sort of the grater. And as it curls, it gets like these little patterns on the outside, which is quite cool. And then I can do it, I did it on the smaller one as well, that gives you smaller gaps. But I'm going to continue, going to make tagliatelle because that's what I want to make for my spaghetti bolognese. So here's my pasta, just all laid out. So 100 grams of flour and 1 egg made that much. Now that might probably be enough for 2 people. So if you're making for 4 people, then obviously double it, so 200 grams of flour and 2 eggs. All right, have a bit of fun with it, and then I'll show you me cooking it later on. So I'll leave that to dry for a bit.